As Americans, we cannot allow this to continue. It is time to liberate our communities from this scourge of drug addiction.
20 pounds of heroin hidden behind a wall in a suburban judge's house. This wasn't a gang stash house, this was the collapse of justice right behind the courtroom door. Marcus Hale wasn't just taking bribes, he was the mastermind architect behind a pipeline moving nearly 1 ton of fentanyl and laundering $41 million in dirty money. What happens when the guardian of the law turns out to be the crime boss? And who else in the system got bought? Tune in to Operation Crosscut, the story of the coldest betrayal in modern judicial history, where the truth about the rot finally gets exposed. Darkness still blanketed the quiet suburban streets of Cobb County, Georgia at 5:42 in the morning. That was the hour when silence still ruled a fake calm, hiding the storm about to break. The sickly yellow streetlights spilled over empty roads, and no one could have guessed that behind the door of one stately home, the very symbol of justice and order, a horrifying truth was about to be ripped into the open. When the hallway light flickered once and died, the pounding boots of the FBI and ICE tactical teams began tearing the night apart. They moved like ghosts, slicing through the thin glass of false dignity, no shouts, no warnings, only the sound of cold precision. These men carried the weight of the mission on their shoulders because they knew exactly what they were about to face. Not some ordinary criminal den, but the total collapse of character inside what was supposed to be a fortress of the law. The solid steel door of the house gave way under the force of the breaching ram, the explosion of sound rolling like thunder announcing the end of an underground empire. Inside, family photographs still hung crooked on the walls, frozen smiles of a man standing next to the flag he had sworn to defend. But behind that smile, trust had long since rotted away. As the agents pushed deeper into the house, they uncovered a false wall cleverly disguised. Behind it lay not case files or career mementos, but 20 pounds of heroin vacuum sealed and stacked with warehouse precision, along with $2.4 million in cash, carefully banded and sealed. The basement, which should have been a middle-class family's rec room, was packed with tactical rifles and handguns. Yet the real betrayal wasn't in the drugs or the guns, it was in Judge Marcus Hale's unlocked phone. On the glowing screen in the darkness, investigators found encrypted message threads with Tindagua, a top lieutenant in a Venezuelan cartel so ruthless even his own soldiers feared him. The conversations between a United States judge and an international narco weren't about justice or leniency. They were about shipment schedules, strategies to stall law enforcement, and the exact timing of courtroom rulings designed to open safe corridors for the poison to flow through. This wasn't mere corruption. This was absolute loyalty to a cartel over the country he had sworn to serve. The naked truth laid bare that rot doesn't start in dark alleys or poor neighborhoods. It starts inside the system itself, from the very people who hold the highest power. The deeper they dug, the more the respectable facade of Marcus Hale shattered, revealing a monster who had nurtured crime at the heart of society. Marcus Hale wasn't a victim coerced by the cartel, he was a core piece of it. He didn't just open doors for criminals to walk through, he built those doors himself. Financial analysts traced a river of dirty money totaling $41.7 million over the past 6 years. That money was laundered through 47 shell companies in Delaware, Panama, and Curacao. These companies had no employees, no products, no real business activity at all. They existed for one purpose, only to legitimize drug profits through the United States financial system. The dirty cash flowed in a cold, calculated loop wired from Venezuelan front companies, disguised as consulting fees, then funneled into Georgia-based entities handpicked by Hale himself. From the grooming outside, it looked like a judge simply making smart legal investments, but inside the case files, it was a nonstop conveyor belt moving blood money. The message directing Run 38 shipments with a promise of zero interference left investigators stunned. It confirmed that nearly 1 ton of heroin and fentanyl had slipped through in just 3 months under the direct protection of a judge. Agents also uncovered an encrypted calendar of meetings with 12 county officials and 3 high-ranking police officers tied directly to $8.3 million in bribes traced through bank records. That was the price paid for silence and for clearing the path for the White Death. The truth went far beyond theory. This judge hadn't merely failed to protect justice, he had personally engineered the pipeline poisoning American neighborhoods. As Marcus Hale's role was exposed, federal agencies immediately triggered Operation Crosscut to sever the cartel's lifeline across the entire United States. In the pre-dawn darkness of Thursday, simultaneous raids exploded across 7 states with zero warning. In Savannah, covert special response teams closed in on a row of riverside warehouses, hiding Venezuelan packing equipment and precursor chemicals. When the doors blew open and the strike force poured in, panicked suspects bolted toward the docks only to be pinned instantly by drones locking down every escape route. Within minutes, the entire complex was under absolute control. In Houston, agents hit an industrial park turned packaging hub while the lights were still blazing. Armed lookouts who tried to bolt were dragged down by K-9 teams, leaving behind a scene reeking of chemicals and stacked barrels of precursors and precision scales. But the fiercest showdown erupted at the distribution hub in New Jersey. When federal forces stormed in, suspects scattered in every direction between rows of shipping containers, kicking up clouds of dust and chaos. The chase ended almost as fast as it began. Technology sealed every gap, and even the one holdout barricaded inside a refrigerated trailer was snatched the moment thermal sensors lit him up. Judge Marcus Hale didn't just take bribes, he designed the entire criminal network. When the guardian of the law turns out to be the architect of a drug pipeline, what the hell is rotted hollow inside the justice system? Across the 7 raid locations, the seized evidence smashed every record: 1.8 tons of narcotics of every kind, 312 firearms, and $142 million in assets. But the truly earth-shattering find came buried in a locked records vault in Newark. Agents discovered meticulously kept ledgers detailing payment schedules and coded references to dozens of public officials. One handwritten note stood out as the ultimate proof of betrayal from within. Hale guarantees clearance, do not deviate. The public reaction exploded like a bomb. The men and women in handcuffs weren't street corner dealers or faceless mules. They were administrators, officers, inspectors, and power brokers, people stitched deep into the machinery of daily American life. Communities woke up to news choppers circling industrial parks, flashing blue lights outside government buildings, and press conferences talking about systemic infiltration instead of isolated bad apples. What Operation Crosscut ripped open wasn't just a drug pipeline. It was an access network, a system where influence and bureaucracy had been weaponized to move poison across the country under the cover of legality. The real shock wasn't that the cartel had reached into America. It was that the people with the authority had rolled out the welcome mat and invited them in. The fallout from Operation Crosscut detonated nationwide, revealing a horrifying picture of systemic rot rather than the actions of one rogue judge. The investigation showed corruption had wormed its way into the very core of government through quiet handshakes and paperwork dressed up as routine. Ledgers and encrypted messages laid bare brazen deals, a Fulton County deputy sheriff taking cash disguised as security consulting fees, a Jacksonville planning commissioner greenlighting warehouse leases in exchange for wire transfers, and a Chicago port inspector waiving import inspections on dates that lined up perfectly with the cartel's calendar. Every piece of evidence proved the same thing: crime hadn't just infiltrated the law, it had been raised and fed inside it. The numbers laid it bare with brutal clarity: $8.3 million in bribes over 5 years, 12 police officers and 3 contractors under active investigation, and a string of cases mysteriously dismissed to shield the guilty. This betrayal went far beyond money. It was the deliberate clearing of a highway for drugs to flood schools and hospitals, seeding violence straight into neighborhoods. Outside the Atlanta courthouse, raw fury erupted. Crowds gathered demanding to know how justice could still exist when the people sworn to enforce the law were the criminals themselves. Amid chants for resignations and prosecutions, many stood stunned in silence, unable to accept that the same polished public servants they'd trusted had been the ones feeding the monster. The earthquake ripped through every level of government, 2 sheriffs forced to resign within hours. Emergency closed-door meetings that stretched into the night, and frantic statements from police unions trying to distance themselves from the wreckage. Resistance flared anyway, with some officials screaming federal overreach and turning press conferences into political theater full of denial and outrage. Despite the noise, the FBI kept widening the map, exposing a web of complicity that stretched farther than anyone had dared imagine. At the absolute center of the storm stood Judge Marcus Hale, now locked up without bail and staring down a stack of federal charges that could bury him for life. In front of the cameras, Marcus Hale's bowed, silent head carried more weight than any confession, laying bare the ice-cold reality that the cartel had sunk roots deep into the very institutions sworn to stop them. Inside federal headquarters, speculation had given way to ironclad proof of a criminal machine operating at massive scale. Investigators cataloged 1,809 tons of seized narcotics, enough poison to drown entire cities for months. Next to that sat a frozen fortune worth $144.4 million, cash-locked bank accounts, and 120 gold bars, all now sealed away in government vaults. Alongside the 324 seized firearms, the real bombshell was the data trove of names. From ledgers to emails to encrypted chats, everything exposed a corruption network where loyalty itself had been auctioned off. Federal prosecutors have already drawn up indictments for 184 individuals, not just narco foot soldiers, but the very law enforcement officers and government officials who sold out. Faced with mountain-high evidence, some defendants are already flipping and pleading out for leniency, while others clam up or claim confusion. But the records are too consistent, too detailed, time-stamped, routed, and cross-referenced to deny. This rot wasn't hidden. It was documented, rubber-stamped, and routed through the system proof of a calculated full-scale invasion of the machinery of government itself. Communities across the affected states reacted with a raw mix of disbelief and painful recognition. In some neighborhoods, the news simply confirmed what residents had long suspected, that a powerful, invisible hand had been steering the flow of drugs and violence all along. In others, the shock hit like a freight train. Teachers, church leaders, office workers, people who had shaken hands with the very officials, now exposed, were left staring at their own memories, asking how deep the betrayal really ran. The fallout hit local governments like a sledgehammer. Offices left empty, overnight courtrooms grinding to a halt, emergency audits and snap elections rushed in to try to stitch public trust back together. Federal officials made it clear this wasn't the end. It was only the opening shot in a years-long purge still to come. At the heart of the scandal, Judge Marcus Hale's empty chair on the bench became a haunting symbol. The dignified facade of the courthouse still stood, but faith in the robes had collapsed. The case drove home one brutal truth to the public. Drugs don't just slip across borders on their own. They glide through the very institutions that were corrupted to let them pass. Those systems were built, run, and guarded by the very people handed the public's trust. And when that trust is violated, the damage doesn't start with the drugs. It starts where the law itself bends. In stories like this, it's easy to point at the narcotics, the guns, the cash, the hard physical proof of crime. But what this case really exposes is something far more dangerous, the quiet collapse of integrity. Because when the law becomes the gateway, when the judge is the one holding the door wide open, when the system designed to protect the innocent turns into a shield for the guilty, the poison spreads deeper than any single shipment ever could. It wasn't just heroin hidden behind a wall, it was trust broken down, vacuum sealed, and sold off by the pound. That's the real cost, not measured in pounds or dollars, but in faith. Communities lean on courtrooms, badges, agencies, and institutions to stand as the last hard line between order and chaos. When those guardians turn their backs, the damage doesn't just stain a record, it reshapes the future. Addiction spreads. Violence follows families, shatter neighborhoods, bleed out, and people start believing justice isn't real. Only influence is. The fight in Operation Crosscut was never just federal agents versus a drug cartel. It was a head-on clash between light and darkness at the very heart of the justice system. It proved that when those in power choose to betray the public's trust, the fallout is not only tons of poison flooding the streets, but a fundamental earthquake in faith in justice itself. Thankfully, there are still agents, investigators, and everyday citizens willing to stand up and demand transparency and accountability. It is a powerful reminder that justice is truly protected only when all of us stay vigilant and refuse to stay silent. The deepest lesson from the Marcus Hale case is that corruption can be structural and operate in plain sight under the cloak of legality. Crime doesn't wear a black hoodie, it hides inside robes and suits using shell companies, emergency permits, and closed-door meetings to turn the machinery of government into a drug superhighway. The danger lies in how easily we trust polished titles and complicated paperwork. That's why every single person watching this needs to stay wide awake. Justice only survives when we dare to look past the red tape and demand real transparency at every level of power. The Marcus Hale case lays bare one ice-cold truth. The real damage isn't the drugs or the money, it's the trust that got shattered. When the system built to protect the innocent becomes a shield for the guilty, who the hell is left to protect us? Remember, corruption only wins when the public looks away. Do you see it clearly now? Drop. I see if you refuse to stay blind to this rot. Drop justice if you believe accountability has to reach every damn level of power. Share this video far and wide so real justice finally gets its day.